Hamlin's won dozens of NASCAR races. He's a two-time Daytona 500 champion. He's won a bunch of crown jewel races. But this race today at ISM Raceway in front of a sold-out Phoenix crowd might just be his most impressive drive I've seen in his career. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Well, it's official. This season started back in February and here we are. We finally know who the Championship 4 contenders are going to be. Today's race at Phoenix, not a super eventful one. We'll talk about the race itself. We'll talk about this aero package and the controversy surrounding it just one more time. We'll talk about that at the end of this episode. I'll put this race on the Groovy gauge, but I want to spend the bulk of this episode talking about the epic championship battle we saw today. You know, this race wasn't super eventful. Not a lot of passing up front for sure. I mean, Denny Hamlin lapped pretty much the entire field at one point in this race. But what made this race so interesting is that the 6 drivers coming into this race that still were vying for those last 2 playoff spots, they were consistently all in the top 6. Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, Larson, Blaney, those are the drivers that were not locked into the Championship 4 yet coming into this race, and pretty much all race long, they were in the top 5, top 6, top 7. They were the drivers that we were talking about from start to finish. They were up front, contending. They all brought their best stuff this weekend, and it showed. And so while the racing itself was not super thrilling, had a couple great moments, but overall the race was kind of meh, the most interesting part was the fact that the championship contending drivers all brought their best stuff and all showed out, and that was extremely interesting to watch. So I want to talk about how everyone ran, how these championship drivers ran. Gotta talk about Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, some of the other major players who had a lot of interesting things happen to them in this race. We're going to talk about all that. So let's start by, really quick, let's just look at the top 20 finishing results, but I'm going to focus on these playoff drivers. Top 2 finishers there, Joe Gibbs Racing, Toyotas, and you see the top 6, all drivers that were in the playoffs at the time this race was run, and you look there, the top 4 guys were all looking to lock into Homestead today. So that's what I'm saying. The contenders showed up and were the most exciting part of this race. But as you can see, the top 2 finishers of this race also ended up being the 2 drivers who snagged the final 2 Championship 4 spots, Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch. Joey Logano, you see there, finished 9th. He actually won a stage early on in this race, ran really well, led a whole bunch of laps, but a pit stop at the beginning of stage 3, an air pressure adjustment gone wrong apparently, completely ruined that race car. It went from a first top 3 car to a 15th to 20th place car. He lost an entire lap on just 1 fuel run. He went from the front row on a restart to 1 fuel run, less than a full fuel run later, he was a lap down and struggling to even stay in the top 15. And that killed Joey Logano, the defending champion, shot of making it to Homestead this year. He just did not have enough to keep up with the 2 Gibbs cars. When Hamlin took the lead and ultimately won this race, which I'll talk about in a moment, that resulted in Kyle Busch and Joey Logano being the final 2 guys to compete for that last spot, and Logano just could not hang with Kyle Busch in the second half of this race. And it's kind of what we've seen all year. Penske's been so close to Joe Gibbs most of the season, especially early on this year. Busch was winning a lot, Truex was winning a lot, but so were Logano and Keselowski. But ever since the beginning of this year, slowly but surely, Joe Gibbs has just pulled away from Penske. And it's been obvious since about probably June on that Joe Gibbs Racing is the best team in the series this year. And Penske's kind of back with the other guys, probably in second, but back with the rest of the pack. It's Joe Gibbs and then everybody else. And that's kind of what we saw here today. Early on in this race, Penske was hanging with them. Joey Logano was right up there hanging with them. By the end of this thing, clearly, as you can see there, Joe Gibbs Racing drove away, and nobody could stop him. Let's talk about Denny Hamlin for a moment here. I feel like he should be the main story. He's the main topic, the main focus of this episode. He is the protagonist of today's show, if you will. Even if you're not a big Denny Hamlin fan, you have to look at the struggles, the failures he's had in his career leading up to this point, to this now triumph of him getting to Homestead. The battle's still not done, but this is a huge step forward, a major moment in his career. I think there's a lot to talk about, so let's unpack a little bit of Denny Hamlin's day. Hamlin was actually on the show just last week. My last episode of Out of the Groove I uploaded just a few days ago. Denny Hamlin appeared on the show. I got to talk to him, ask him a few questions. I asked him about his approach coming into this weekend, and he told us then, and he told NBC later in the week that he was going into the race kind of thinking points first, and depending on how stage 1 and even stage 2 went, that would dictate how they ran the 3rd stage. Clearly, I don't think Denny Hamlin expected to have just the best car he's had all season when he rolled into Phoenix this weekend, because that's basically what he had. He was fast in practice on Friday and Saturday, fast in qualifying, qualified up there near the front, and pretty early on in this race, we could tell he was the fastest car with the way dirty air was, with the way his packages, with the way his competition was driving. It was hard for him to pass. He wasn't able to lead a whole lot of laps early. He was having to battle with Chase Elliott, Joey Logano, but it was clear he was faster than them. And by the end of this race, once he did get out front and get that clean air, he just drove away. I mean, when other guys led in this race, they would pull away to decent leads, but they'd often give it back. Denny Hamlin, when he got the lead, he was gone. He was clearly the best car in this race, and I think that changed that team's strategy pretty early on. I think when they realized how good he was, he won the stage early on. I think they realized that they needed to go for the win in this case, especially given how well Joey Logano and Kyle Busch were running. But even at the very end, it was not easy. They almost threw this thing away. Let's talk about the ending of this race. Throughout most of stage 3 went mostly caution-free. Denny Hamlin had like an 11-second lead at one point. He'd lapped up to like 9th place, so he was dominant. He was running away with this. Looked like he was for sure going to lock in. Had nothing to worry about. Until Matt Tifft hit the wall with about, 8 laps to go. That brought out a late caution and a late set of pit stops where Denny Hamlin and his crew chief Chris Gabehart decided to go with 2 tires, despite entering pit road with a huge gap over Kyle Busch, Ryan Blaney. And you thought maybe they'd go the conservative route and take 4 tires since they had a lot of position to play with there. They went with 2 tires, a huge risk given that only one other driver took 2 tires as well, Ryan Blaney. Steve Letarte on the NBC broadcast, as well as myself, both thought that was possibly a really bad mistake. Denny Hamlin, if he takes 4 tires, he restarts second probably, maybe still first, depending on how Blaney's stop really went. He might have still came out ahead of Blaney and had the lead, but worst case, Hamlin would have been second on the restart with the best tires in the field. The reason I was nervous for Denny Hamlin taking 2 tires there is we saw earlier in the race, on 4 tires, Hamlin really struggled on restarts. He lost 4 spots before they even got through turn 2, despite leading on a restart, and that was when he was on equal tires with everybody else. I figured if he was on 2 tires and he had his teammates behind him with 4 tires, I just thought they'd eat his lunch. But nope, Denny Hamlin, to his credit, this is the perfect opportunity for Denny Hamlin to do what he's done a lot in his career, choke. He did not. That was one of the highest pressure restarts maybe of his entire career, and he nailed it. He got through the gears perfectly cleanly. He didn't spin the tires at all. He nailed it and drove off and managed to still hold on to the win. Kyle Busch was all over him still, but he was able to drive off and get the win. Obviously, his teammates there, Kyle Busch, Truex, probably weren't going to race him super duper hard. That win mattered a lot more to Denny Hamlin there than it did to either of them. So I'm sure Joe Gibbs would have had a talking to if Kyle Busch had nudged Hamlin out of the way at the end there. But still, Hamlin drove the wheels off that thing those final 3 laps, so he managed to get the win. I thought that caution was going to ruin yet another promising championship run for Hamlin this year, but he managed to get it done. This is what I've been saying for a while now, and this is why Hamlin was my pick when the playoffs started. We've seen a new Denny Hamlin this year. 2019 Hamlin seems more mature, seems more just ready to win than any other previous Denny Hamlin we've seen. He's got now 6 wins this season. He's won at a wide variety of tracks. We've seen it just since Daytona and then Texas earlier this year especially. It just looked like Denny Hamlin, obviously Joe Gibbs is great this year, but Denny Hamlin's finally taking advantage of how great that equipment is. Joe Gibbs Racing has been great for many, many years in NASCAR, but often it's Kyle Busch or Martin Truex Jr. or even Matt Kenseth and Carl Edwards back in the day that were kind of leading the team each year. This is the first year where, other than that first few races of the season when Kyle Busch was on fire, it feels like Denny Hamlin, this has been his team this year. I know Truex has more wins, but Denny Hamlin's just been so consistent this year. Truex has races where he just disappears. Like I know today he still had a top 5 run for most of the day, but we didn't talk about Martin Truex Jr. today. Denny Hamlin, this has been the most consistent I've seen from him in his entire career. He made that mistake at Texas, which was a glimpse of the old Denny Hamlin, and I talked about in my episode then that was a glimpse of the old Denny Hamlin, but I figured he had a very good chance of coming back and winning this weekend because of just how good that team is and how good they've been and how consistent they've been at such a wide variety of tracks this year. Look at these playoffs. They won at 1.5 miles a few weeks ago, and now they've won at this flat mile track in Phoenix. That's 2 very different racetracks they've won at just in these playoffs alone, just in the last month. But Denny Hamlin deserves a lot of credit. Obviously, we still have 1 race to go, and it's anyone's championship at this point. I still riding with Hamlin. He was my pick at the beginning of the playoffs. I'll keep going with Denny Hamlin here, but Kyle Busch is going to be good, even though he hasn't won a race in like 20 weeks. Martin Truex Jr. is still going to be really good. They've had plenty of time to prepare. Kevin Harvick, he's going to be sneaky good. He's the only non-Toyota in that championship for, so he might be sneaky good in that thing. It's anyone's race. It's anyone's season at this point. But Denny Hamlin, just to come through in this clutch moment, he was at the lowest of lows after last weekend at Texas. And in the past, when Hamlin got low, he just couldn't pull himself out of that hole. This year, new Denny Hamlin with that new 11 car, new 11 team, Chris Gabehart at the helm, they pulled themselves out of it in a way that they couldn't have done 10 years ago in 2010. Anyway, while there was some high highs there for Denny Hamlin, there was also a pretty low for Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott, I mentioned earlier how a lot of these championship contenders were running in the top 5, top 6 all day long. Chase Elliott was one of them for at least the first 2 stages. He was consistently up there in the top 2, top 3. Didn't look like he was quite as good as Hamlin or even Logano early on, but he was really, really close. And with the importance of track position in this race, that pit crew was good enough. He was good enough that he was hanging in there, hanging tough, wasn't losing track position, was still in contention very much. He was in a must-win scenario, but it all went away late or in the second half of this race when he blew a tire and wrecked. Chase Elliott Elliott had 3 finishes in this round of worse than 30th place. First driver in NASCAR playoff history, which I know is only a few years now, but he's the first driver to finish outside the top 30 in all 3 races of a round. So there's a new record for Chase Elliott. Mechanical issues at Martinsville, driver mistake at Texas, and then this was kind of, I don't know, a tire going down. It was weird because it was only like 10 laps into a run, so I don't think it was the driver working the car too hard. I don't think he had a tire rub. I don't think the pit crew necessarily set it up wrong. I think it might have just he ran over something. Just bad luck, basically. So mechanical issues, driver issues, and then bad luck. Perfect storm, just completely derailed Chase Elliott here in the round of 8. But he'll be back next year. I will say, this is his 4th year, and the one thing I've been big on Chase Elliott since he's gotten into the Cup Series is that every single year he makes a clear improvement. First year he made it into the playoffs as a rookie, which we've seen other rookies have had a harder time doing that, so that was impressive. Second year, he almost made it to the championship 4. Third year, in 2018, he won a few races. This year, 2019, he won more races, seemed really consistent, had that great race at the Roval that is going to go down in history as one of the great comebacks in NASCAR history. Chase Elliott's continuing to take some small strides. I thought this year he had a real shot at making it to the championship 4. I think next year he might even have a better shot. I think he's going to learn from a lot of this, and at the end of the day, if he doesn't have all those mistakes, the mechanical issues, the driver issues, or this bad luck here at Phoenix, he would have very much been in contention for the championship this year. He might have made it to Homestead if those issues hadn't come up, but that team still has room to grow. Hendrick Motorsports as an organization, hopefully their best years are still ahead of them, but we'll see what happens to Chase Elliott. He'll be back in 2020, and I think he'll still be a strong contender. Probably going to be the top championship contender out of Hendrick next year again. Going into Homestead next weekend, Kyle Busch, Denny, Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., and Kevin Harvick are your 4 championship contenders. 3 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyotas and 1 Stewart Haas Racing Ford. I'm going to be at Homestead next weekend, so that's going to be awesome. But in the meantime, later this week, I'm definitely going to have at least one big Homestead preview episode where I look at each driver by the numbers, give you guys my championship predictions. Last year, it was kind of the same lineup. We had Busch, Truex, and Harvick, and Joey Logano last year, and Logano, the one driver without a championship of those 4, won it. This year, take those same 3 of Busch, Truex, and Harvick, and replace Denny Hamlin now in place of Joey Logano. Maybe Hamlin could play spoiler for the 2nd year in a row. That's what Logano did last year. I think Denny Hamlin's got a real good shot at it. But I'll talk about all that later this week. Really quick, let's put this race on the groovy gauge. So this race was not very eventful. It had a couple great moments. Some of the restarts were fun, 3, 4, 5 wide. Pit strategy was interesting at times, especially at the end there. The Hamlin, Blaney going with 2 tires. Ooh, I wasn't sure on that one. But ultimately, this race was not good. The aero package, once again, showing that it doesn't work at tracks 1 mile or shorter. Big spoilers are just in the way. I just think they need to get rid of the big spoilers for these races next year. If they can just do that, which I don't think would raise the cost. Even Bob Levine, owner of Levine Family Racing, responded to one of my tweets a couple weeks ago saying that no, just replacing the spoiler with a smaller spoiler would not cost much money. I think that's something they really need to look at for 2020. I know they're only going to have 1 more year of this package, but if Phoenix is going to be the championship race next year, they got to do something. It was just too hard to pass. You move up in front of somebody in the middle of the turn, and it doesn't matter if you're a much worse car than they are. They can't pass you. That really was not possible to pass when somebody took your line away, and that's just not cool. This race did have some great moments. Hamlin versus Chase Elliott went back and forth, beating and banging for position at the end of one run and then later on a restart, so that was pretty exciting. That was some great moments given that the championship implications between the two. That was fun racing. Late in this thing was still entertaining as well. Lap traffic came into play and created some fun moments as well, but more than less, this was not a great or very entertaining Phoenix race. I'm going to give it a 40% on the groovy gauge. The most interesting part was the fact that the drivers running first, second, third, fourth on the racetrack were the drivers that were trying to lock into Homestead. That kept it interesting because every pass, there weren't very many passes, but when there was a pass, it was extremely important and extremely interesting to watch. So that kind of saved this race from being a complete wash. But yeah, this was a below average race for Phoenix. I like Phoenix. I love that they renovated the track. I got to get out there at some point because it looks amazing. It was a sellout crowd. Campsites looked full this weekend. But the racing on track was not good this week. So hopefully they make I feel like it's just one small, I'm not an engineer, but I feel like they just take that 8-inch spoiler, however tall it is, and just make it half as big as it is now, which I just don't think would be that big of an undertaking for the teams to take on. They just make that one change. Don't touch the spoiler, don't touch the splitter, don't touch the horsepower, don't touch anything else. Just affect the spoiler. I just can't imagine. I feel like that would improve the racing dramatically and not add a whole lot of cost or a whole lot of stuff for the teams to take on financially. but I'm not an expert. I know NASCAR was pressured by the race teams this year to have one uniform package to be used at all the racetracks. NASCAR was interested in having a slightly different short track and speedway package, but a lot of the race teams came out and said, no, we just want one car that we can use everywhere, and that's why we have this problem. Don't look at NASCAR. NASCAR wanted to change it. They wanted to have a special short track version of this package. The race teams said no. So don't come after NASCAR too hard for this one. I definitely think they're looking at limiting the effects of dirty air for the next gen car, and I'm sure the teams are mostly all behind that. But I hope that they're able to kind of come to an agreement and make some small change for these short tracks next year, because I think that's needed, especially if Phoenix is going to be the championship race next year. But that's all I got for this episode. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like I said, I'll have some more episodes up later this week. We're going to be previewing Homestead, the finale. I'll be there in person, so if you're going to be at the track this weekend, come say hi. I don't really plan on doing a meetup, but I know there's going to be some other people within the NASCAR YouTube space that are also going to be there as well, so maybe we will do a meetup of some kind. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. I'll keep you updated if I do anything like that later this weekend. But yeah, I got more episodes planned for this week. Thank you for watching. Thank you to my Patreon supporters: Michael Harrison, at You As The Stars, Cameron James, John Colbins, Jason R. Long, Isaac Dennison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, TheRacingInsiders.com, Matthew Koulapos, Pepe Lucius, Jeremy Conklin, Emilio Garcia, Joey DiMachino, Sky Racing Forum, Bryce Schumacher, Bryce Starcher, Scott McNew, Colton Austin, and the rest of these. Oh, I forgot Bradley Pellicci. I always forget about Bradley down there. Almost, there he is, right there. Thank you for your continued support. All of you are super amazing. Continue to help this show grow. Couldn't do it without you guys. And yeah, I think that's about all I had to hit on. Wasn't a super thrilling race today, but it was still exciting to see Denny Hamlin pull it off, get the big win. Biggest win maybe of his career, at least as far as championship. Not the best paying win of his career for sure, but one of the biggest wins as far as just timing, place, and overall significance to this season. I think that was really fun to see Denny Hamlin get that win just a few days after he was on the show. That's pretty cool. You're welcome, Denny Hamlin fans. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you again very, very soon. Have a good rest of your weekend, everyone.